Just picked up my rental car. Now I'm driving through West Jerusalem on the way to my tour in a town called Kfar Adumim, which is deep inside the West Bank. It's about halfway to the Dead Sea. Right now our State Department, in fact, every Western government is advising their citizens not to travel inside the West Bank. Just can't resist. I'll explain more in a minute, but just trying to find my way out of West Jerusalem now, and fun to be driving. Oh yeah, I'm definitely inside the West Bank now. It's probably outer East Jerusalem, but yeah, they're driving more aggressively here, which is making me more aggressive. And I almost ran over a Palestinian kid, which would be probably not good for international relations, so I think I'm going to chill out just a little bit here. But yeah, your adrenaline gets going. It's fun. There's camels standing out here. Just like standing here next to the road. That is so awesome. Okay, made it to Kfar Adumim. This is actually an illegal Israeli settlement, by the way, and I don't know if everybody who's watching this has heard of those, but huge issue since the 1967 Six-Day War, when the Israelis captured the West Bank, the Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. Ever since then, every U.S. president, starting with the president at that time, Lyndon Johnson, that was the year I was born, so yeah, know who the president was then. Every president on both sides, Democrat or Republican, have just really been annoyed with the Israelis. Don't, go ahead and occupy the territories if you need to, but don't build settlements. The Israelis have nevertheless built about 120 settlements. And researching online, of course, I want to know where the heck I was going today. And what I learned is that Kfar Adumim is part of a block that is one of the three top most disputed settlements. So this is one of three that the Israelis just absolutely do not want to give up. And so, a lot of issues here. The United Nations, this is one of the main reasons that they don't like Israel, because of the illegal Israeli settlement, and they say that it violates the Fourth Geneva Convention that states that if a power occupies another territory, that they're not to start to transfer their own citizens there. So, big issue. Biblically, these areas do belong to Israel. I'm not even as far as the Jordan River yet. So, the Bible says that Israel, this is Israel. So if you're a Jew or Christian, if you're a believer, then you'll go along with that. Apart from that, just from a secular standpoint, politically and strategically, tactically, Israel cannot afford to give up these territories. They just can't. I've studied all this stuff, international relations. That was my major. And in some spots of Israel, they'll only be 10 miles wide. George Bush in 2005 talked Israel into giving up Gaza, giving it back to the Palestinians, and just pulling out completely. And they evacuated every Israeli settlement in Gaza just to try to keep the peace process going. The very first day, Hamas started shelling Sderot and the other cities down in the Negev desert, mainly Sderot, and I'm going there in a couple of days. But they've been sending rockets into Sderot and Beersheba, Ashdod, Eilat ever since, and now Islamic Jihad is entrenched there. So the point is that Israel tried it. It's a disaster. Israel needs to hold on to these territories. And this is my first look at an official illegal Israeli settlement, Kfar Adumim. And boy, the Israeli part the Jewish part, I should say, looks nice. Boker Tov. Okay, so this is the Techelet factory. Pretty humble looking place, huh? Here's their restroom, lovely amenities. Believe it or not, this place happens to house one of the most profound discoveries of our time, in my opinion. So let's go find out about Techelet.
Tchelet. Tchelet is a color, a blue string that we're told in the Torah, V'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf b'til tchelet. The Jews should put on the corner of their four-cornered garments a blue thread. But what is this tchelet? Where does it come from? Look behind me. We're at the Kotel in the old city of Jerusalem. We see many different types of people, old and young, small and big, wearing all sorts of different types of talitot, also different shapes, different sizes, but very few of them actually wear the blue thread. What is this blue thread? Where did it go?
You have a manuscript here, a medieval manuscript, where you can see there's a picture of King Solomon, a picture of Aaron the priest, and both of them are wearing the tchelet and the argaman. Both of them are wearing the blues. And that's exactly what the tchelet would connote. The ideas and the imagery that would be brought up when a person would look at these strings. He would remember, I'm not a peasant farmer. And no matter what his station in life, he would realize and he would hold his head up high and remember, I am a priest, I am a king, I am a prince.
If Tchelet was so important to Am Yisrael, so important that 3 times a day in the Shema, the Jews say the word Tchelet and ask that we have Tchelet on our garments, how could it be that it was forgotten? And that brings us to the Roman Cardo, the ancient Roman street in the middle of the old city. And truthfully, it was the Romans that started the demise of Tchelet. First of all, the year 70, the temple was destroyed, the city of Jerusalem was destroyed, and finally Eretz Yisrael was decimated. And that meant the Jews were exiled. Where were they exiled to? They were exiled to Babylon. In Babylon, they didn't have access to the Mediterranean. They didn't have access to the snails that create tchelet. Secondly, by the year 380 or so, the Romans declared that anybody wearing these expensive garments, other than Caesar himself and some of the generals, should be put to death. Thirdly, the tremendous expense of these garments made it impossible for an impoverished Jewish community to afford them. And finally, the Arab conquest of the entire Middle East put an end to this ancient craft of dyeing with tchelet. Our story begins in the 1880s, when the Radziner Rebbe decided that the Messiah couldn't come until we had tchelet. So he studied all the sources, and he made a trek to Italy, to the Mediterranean, and he went into the ocean, and he said, I found it. What did he find? He found a squid. It took him a long time, and finally was able to produce some sort of a blue dye. Many of his Hasidim wore it, but it generally wasn't accepted by the religious population of Europe at the time. Came along Rav Herzog. Rav Herzog was the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, and he wrote his doctoral thesis on tchelet. Rav Herzog studied the Radziner as well as all the secular, religious, and chemical, and historical, and archaeological sources, and he was able to look at the Radziner dye and disprove it for many reasons. The bottom line was Rav Herzog was convinced that it had to come from a mollusk, and the majority of his research, he found there was only one snail that it could be, and that was the Murex trunculus. And after 80 years of research since Rav Herzog, with chemical advances and historical and archaeological research, a person by the name of Rabbi Eliyahu Tevger went to the ocean 7 or 8 years ago, found the snail, studied the sources, went to the Chemical Institute, learned how to dye, and 3 of us joined him at the ocean one day, collected some snails, and started producing the tchelet. And that's how Amutat Patil Tchelet was formed, the Patil Tchelet organization.
Here we saw the opportunity to actually bring back a commandment in the Torah, bring back a mitzvah in the Torah that has been lost for 1,300 years. And I think since that day on the beach, the 3 of us, the 4 of us, we all decided that this is the opportunity to actually take something that God commanded the Jews on Mount Sinai that's been lost for 1,300 years and to bring it back to the Jewish people.
Our journey's taken us on a trek of thousands of miles. We've been on the mountains, we've been in the water, we've been in the chem labs. But what's it all about? Is it all about just making a color from a snail that's found in the Mediterranean? Really not. Tchelet is a world in and of itself, and much more than just a blue thread. So the next time you read the Shema or kiss your tzitzit, hopefully it's going to make a little bit of a difference. Why is that? Because the blue of tchelet brings you to think about the ocean, and the depth of the ocean reflects the infinity of the sky, and the endlessness of the sky really brings you to think about the creator of the universe.
We know that today that to make one set of tchelet we need 30 snails or even sometimes more to make one dye. I'm going to show you a broken shell.
Wow.
Here you can see it. You have a broken shell, and each shell, each snail that lives in those shells produce this amount of dye. So first of all, you see it's a little bit different. Each one produces a different amount.
And it looks purple.
And that's purple. But we're going to get to it later. But this is amount of dye, and we need 30 of those to make enough dye for one city. So now we got one city.
For one.
For one baguette strings,
Wow.
for 4 strings actually. Now we're going to start with the dyeing process, because dyeing process takes a long time, and we're going to use those time to make all kinds of things. Would you like to do it yourself?
Yeah.
Because I'm doing it for the last 15 years. And here we have of about 1,500 snails.
Wow.
1,500?
Snails cooking in there.
And how do you harvest the snails? Because I mean,
No,
1,500.
They just
I mean, it's like guys
get it
put on
from the sea.
scuba gear and jump in
Yeah.
and start looking around. Wow, let's take forever.
They do scuba diving, and they have all kind of techniques to buy. You can buy them even in the market, so it's not something that you can't get it. Today it's much easier if you compare to 2,000 years ago, because you have those air balloons, you got the mask on your eyes. Didn't have it 2,000 years
Oh
ago.
yeah. Okay.
So make sure all of it is inside.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Where's the?
Ooh, what an ugly color.
Sometime because of
You're
moisture.
looking at the bottom, but
Yeah. Interesting.
Now I'm gonna mix it, so all chemicals.
Ooh,
You see the
Whoa.
reaction between the base and the.
Are you a qualified chemist, Asaf?
Obviously.
No. Should we stand back?
No, we're not.
Okay.
I'm doing it
You know what you're
for
doing.
many years. Yeah. Nobody's blew up here.
Okay. Not yet.
Okay, now we're gonna do the dyeing process. Dyeing process is very simple. Just drop it in, and if you want to do it for tzitzit, you have to say L'Shem Mitzvah Tzitzit. So all the process, we're doing here for tzitziot, we say L'Shem Mitzvah Tzitzit.
I was going to ask you a few minutes ago when you have to say prayers.
It's not prayers, it's just the meaning of it. It's not even a bracha. It's just it's like declaring this
Declaring
is a meaning. It's gonna be for tzitzit. Because if not, then it's gonna. I can make a nice kippah, but not a tzitzit. This is what you just made. You see, it's totally yellowish yet. Okay.
That's one we made, right? And how long does
Yeah.
it take to actually?
In a few minutes, we're gonna take the wool out of it.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Okay. Okay. Let's go to see the sheep.
Okay, let's go see some feet. Ah, there they are.
Yeah,
Recognize that sound.
You can see the sheep. There is one adult male over there. Adult male. And he has a few females. This is the way they used to live in the nature. And he has a new two young born sheep.
Oh yeah, look at that
What do you say?
baby
Sheep.
lamb. Is it okay to pet them? I mean, they're
They won't
dirty.
like it. They just move.
Okay, I'll try the male.
Okay, this is a wool that grows on the sheep.
Wow,
It's
look at
really,
those
really good.
horns.
You have to, first of all, you have to remove the wool. This is by what's called shearing.
Hi, sheep.
Uh,
Skylar would love this.
And
like a petting
the
zoo.
wool is
Hi,
not
baby.
good for
Soft.
any process till you bleach it and comb it. Okay?
I'm sorry, you said this is going to be these will be shofars one day?
Yeah, one day. Yeah.
Ah, excellent.
And there's even a type called Jacobin. So here we see what's the oxygen process taken care of. You see,
Oh my
start changing on the sides.
Wow.
Why on the sides? Because it's has less liquids on the sides. Okay. Here is going to be always the last because most liquids goes down. I'm going to wash it a bit. And the water contains oxygen, that's why it's much faster. We can do it just by leaving it here outside, and it's going to be just the same thing.
Look at that.
It's just going to take more time.
So we made this.
Sorry?
We made this.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're official Techelet manufacturers.
So they asked us to do the dyeing for the Tchelet and Gaman, oil blue and oil purple.
And we're talking about the Temple Institute, just to
Yes.
get it on my video. Yep.
And I did the dyeing for the wool, what they asked me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, the wool came from here.
Okay, and I saw the garments on display at the
Yeah, so
Temple
whatever you
Institute.
see Tchelet and Gaman, most of it comes from here.
Okay.
And
So
they did the process of waving and thing, but dyeing we did it.
okay, so the idea is that once the temple is rebuilt, that Techelet has to be present in order for it to
All the original
to be
garments
legitimate,
already
quote-unquote.
are being prepared by
Yeah.
the Temple Institute in order to have everything, the utensils,
Everything
the garments,
ready for the
everything
Mashiach.
ready for the Mashiach. And there are young students, Kohanim, who learn all the processes to work.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating to me, that this process was lost for 1,300 years, right?
14.
I mean, just even the knowledge of the source and everything, but for it to come up again in our lifetime, to me, seems like a sign that it's getting close. Not to mention, gosh, Israel being reborn, and just very exciting times. And I also feel like you almost need modern technology. Like none of this would even be possible without modern chemistry, and maybe not. The ancients figured it out, right?
Oh,
So yeah, okay.
Where in Arizona are you from?
I'm from Lake Havasu City. And again, this Tequila had to be rediscovered before the temple service could.
Yes,
restart,
this is
right?
what I think I want to add. That I think that what God just did for the last 64 years and even before. First of all, He started this whole revolutionary idea of Jews have to come back to their own land. And whatever I say, that it's God just do things when the time is ready, and that's why there was no need for Tchelet, the information for the Tchelet how it should be made. Till it was not necessary, no reason why to find it out, and then it was just found for the last, let's say, technically and everything, 30 years. Till then, few people knew how to make it, but nobody did anything with this.
So it really wasn't long after the Jews reclaimed the Temple Mount, captured it in the 6-Day
Exactly.
War. So yeah, the timing is just
And again,
fascinating.
it takes many years to get ready to something,
yeah.
and years passing, but more and more knowledge is discovered. For example, how things looked, what was their colors, the source for the color, the source for the materials, and many things.
It's an official Arabian sandstorm coming in. This is dust coming up from Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and the guy here says it's probably going to pull in some rain. It's getting hazy. So that was Tehelet. So why the big fascination? Well, so far I know of 5 things that are still missing before the temple can be rebuilt and temple service be restarted. The first, of course, is the Ark of the Covenant, and like we talked about yesterday on the Temple Mount. Oh my gosh, look at this shanty town. That's the West Bank. That's how the Palestinians are living. Some of them. Wow. Anyways, up on the Temple Mount, talked quite a bit about the Ark of the Covenant and the idea that the rabbis all know where it is now, and in 1981 a couple of them actually found the spot. Wow, that up there. And second thing is the high priest, but at the Temple Institute yesterday, Atara explained that that's easy enough to identify who they're supposed to be, so that won't be a problem. Atara also mentioned something I hadn't heard before, which is the 12th spice needed for the incense. So we know that that's still missing. The fourth thing that's missing is the red heifer, and there's been a couple of candidates just in recent years hasn't quite proved to be kosher. So we're still waiting for the red heifer, but we seem to be getting close. And then the fifth thing that was missing was Techelet, and that's this blue dye that I guess is mentioned first in Exodus, not I think I just ran a red light. Not in Leviticus, but in any event, the special blue dye that has to go on the priestly garments or temple service just cannot be done. So, and just in the last 30 years, in my lifetime, just shortly after the recapturing of the Temple Mount by the Jews, they happened to rediscover the source. The knowledge had been lost for 1,300 years, 1,400 years, or whatever it was, 1,300 years. and didn't even know about the snail. They rediscovered that. The process of creating the dye, they rediscovered that. So the timing of all this is just, it's unmistakable. It seems like the temple is in our very near future. Driving to Megiddo, Mount of Transfiguration, Lebanese border, and Heifer today, so I figured I better start with a good breakfast. This is a famous spot for breakfast. People come from all over the city. Somebody told me, just happened to stumble upon it around the corner from my hotel, so right on, real food. I'm on Highway 6 right now, headed up to Megiddo, or Megiddo. Looking forward to hearing how they actually pronounce it up there. Actually feels really good to get out of Jerusalem for a couple of days. That's an amazing city, but it's still a city. It gets a little bit constricting, and feels really good to be on the open road, getting some fresh air. Way off in the west, I don't know, it's kind of hazy today, not sure if it shows up on camera, but I can see Tel Aviv, and then just a couple of miles to the east of this highway is the West Bank, and the West Bank actually skirts this highway all the way up along this whole stretch between Jerusalem and Megiddo. And I actually just had a really kind of startling revelation about that I won't go into, but in any event, yeah, just the point I was making yesterday about the West Bank. Most of the world is seriously pressuring Israel, and they have been since 1967, to give back the West Bank. When they gave back Gaza in 2005, again, President Bush compelled them to do that. Immediately, Hamas came into power, and started firing rockets into the small towns down in the Negev. We can see how close the West Bank is to Tel Aviv. Of course, it's right next to Jerusalem. It's pretty close to Haifa. Those three cities would just become unlivable. I mean, Hamas would come to power immediately, and Iran would send their people in, and Tel Aviv would just get bombed daily. So Israel's got to hold on to these territories, but wants to survive as a nation. It's just the way that it is. But kind of hairy. Hoping to catch a glimpse of the border fence at some point, the West Bank, out in that direction. So I know I'm looking into the West Bank because I see all kinds of lots of minarets out there. Those are the towers at the mosques that the imams, a whole bunch of minarets, wow, that the imams go to the top of those and then do the calls to prayer. So yeah, just right along the West Bank here, super close to the main Israeli cities. I don't think I picked up those minarets in the last shot. Sorry about that. I was looking at the minarets instead of my viewfinder. So, anyways, yeah, I'd pull off and get a shot because it's kind of neat looking, but no place to pull off here, But anyways, the reason that I was excited to take this particular highway between Jerusalem and Megiddo. In the book of Revelation, I'm going to read that later on, real short passage, but it's actually the only place in the whole book of Revelation that Jesus is quoted. In the prophecy portion of the book of Revelation, where it's in red ink. It's just one verse in the whole prophecy, portion, which is the bulk of the book. And he talks about the armies on both sides of this epic war that we call the Battle of Armageddon, gathering in Megiddo. And in the book of Joel, chapter 2 describes, and I'll talk more about this later too, describes the final conflict, which is actually 45 days later. I'll explain that later. Between the armies of the Antichrist, actually the Antichrist himself, and whatever forces are coming against the Antichrist's army. That their final battle takes place in the Kidron Valley, which is between the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives, in other words, Jerusalem. So the idea is that the war starts up in Megiddo, works its way down this highway. It's my best guess. I mean, why not? If you're going to do, tanks and troops and heavy equipment and all that, this is going to be the way to go. And I guess I'll mention my revelation that I got a minute ago, that this highway, completely skirts the West Bank. And what I noticed is that, I don't know if you can see this on my map, but the green B is Megiddo, the green A is Jerusalem, the blue line is Highway 6. The West Bank, again, completely skirts Highway 6. And what I noticed is that the West Bank actually tops out right at Megiddo, and I'm going to Haifa because I'm assuming that the troops and equipment are going to come into Haifa, which I don't know if you can see it, but it's to the northwest of Megiddo. But anyways, just the fact that the way that the Bible from Joel to Revelation describes this great end times war, seeing the modern borders between Israel and the West Bank, I mean, it lines up perfectly. Of course, let's say if the war started today, and the West Bank was controlled by, the bad side, this is how it would play out. Start in Megiddo, skirt that whole territory, and come right down to Jerusalem. So this picture is coming into better focus for me all the time. Very useful. This is the Megiddo National Park. Just got here. Fantastic. And really beautiful here. Lots of green trees on this side of the mountain. This is called Har Megiddo. Har means mount in Hebrew, and the name Armageddon is just a corruption of that. So Har Megiddo, Armageddon, and just getting ready to make the climb. Lots of history here. Big lizard. This was the gate into the city, the fortress, I should say. The Israelis consider Har Megiddo their most important archaeological site. There's 20 layers of civilization here, dating back about 5,000 years to the late Stone Age, and it's always been associated with the same thing, war. And as I look around the ruins here, I really, get that sense just of fortress and defending the spot. Megiddo's mentioned a number of times in the Old Testament, and always associated with war. My favorite example is the story of Gideon, where he started with 32,000 men. God reduced his troops down to only 300. And this was to go against an army of 135,000. And Gideon, with his 300 men, defeated the Midianites and the Amalekites in the Israel Valley to the right of me here, which we'll look at in a minute. Really an amazing story. And this spirit of war at this place, it's continued into the modern day. As recently as the 20th century, a lot of activity here, an important activity. In late World War I, as the war was coming to an end, the British forces confronted the Ottoman Empire here, the Ottoman Turks, their armies, under British General Allenby. And in 1918, when the war was wrapping up, Allenby finally defeated the Ottomans here, and that ended the Ottoman Empire once and for all. 600 years of Ottoman rule over the Holy Land, Muslim rule over the Holy Land, came to an end. The League of Nations, precursor to the United Nations, was established at the end of World War I. They instituted what was called the British Mandate, which eventually led to the State of Israel in 1948, shortly after the United Nations was formed. That was actually the first act of the United Nations, incidentally, interestingly enough. In that year, 1948, as soon as Israel was declared an official state, all of its Arab neighbors surrounding it, I believe that all of them were involved in the war. Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, and then the surrounding countries, Saudi Arabia, some of the northern African countries, came in and attacked Israel, and you wouldn't think that it would have a chance to survive, but obviously it did. And Israeli troops actually, this was one of the spots that they hunkered in and defended this spot against Arab forces that again were gathered in the Israel Valley down below here. So there's definitely a spirit of war over this place, and that's in our future, maybe near future. This is the Israel Valley. Sometimes we pronounce it Jezreel Valley in English, also known as the Valley of Megiddo or the Plains of Megiddo. And look at this, just completely open and flat, huge area. So really an ideal spot to stage that last great battle in human history that's coming. You just picture all the troops and equipment and activity going on here. It's going to get ugly. You knew I was going to read it, right? This is Revelation chapter 16, getting toward the end of the Great Tribulation period. And again, this is the only place in the whole prophecy portion of the book of Revelation, which is most of the book, where Jesus is quoted, just one verse that's in red ink. This is the sixth bowl of the seventh bowl judgment, or seven bowl judgments. Revelation chapter 16, I'll start in verse 12. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. The Euphrates runs between here and Iran, Iraq, that area. Go figure. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, Satan, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Reference to the Antichrist and his false prophet. For they are spirits of demons performing signs which go out to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. So it's very much World War III. Hopefully 3, hopefully not 4 or 5. I think we can only handle one more. Verse 15, which is the red ink. This is Jesus. Behold, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And they gathered them together to the place called in Hebrew Armageddon. So there it is. And I mentioned earlier that I think that the Battle of Armageddon lasts for the War of Armageddon, whatever you want to call it, lasts for 45 days. And where I get that, and this actually just came to me, I was just going over here. The way I came to that, it was actually about a week before I left for this trip, so I'm still kind of working on this one. But at the very end of the book of Daniel, which is probably the most important Old Testament book regarding the last days and the Great Tribulation, the Antichrist, the prophet Daniel, he ends the book with these 3 verses. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and that's at the third temple when that gets built, and the abomination of desolation is set up, that's where the Antichrist seats himself in the temple and proclaims himself God. And Jesus actually quotes this verse from Daniel in Matthew chapter 24, his great end times dissertation. So they both make reference to it, and that occurs exactly halfway through the 7-year Great Tribulation. Daniel says, there shall be 1,290 days, 3.5 years. Blessed is he who walks and comes to the 1,335 days. But you, Daniel, go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. So that's the end of the book of Daniel. And gosh, for years this has been bothering me. What is that? The difference between the 1,290 days and blessed is he who waits and makes it and survives to the 1,335 days. What's that 45-day difference? And finally, it occurred to me literally a week before this trip. Battle of Armageddon begins here. The war begins at this place. What occurred to me this morning, oh my gosh, yeah, it makes sense. Modern day front line, already drawn on the maps, the UN armistice lines from 1948 when Israel became a state officially. And there it is right there. I'm looking at the West Bank. This must be close. It's just so exciting. And the book of Joel chapter 2, says something different. It's kind of strange. It describes where the final confrontation between the good forces, or I should just say the forces that are fighting against the Antichrist, that final confrontation takes place in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which is actually the Kidron Valley, which sits between the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives. So, simple, but took me a long time. The war starts here, lasts for 45 days. The troops and forces, this side is winning, fights their way down. Most likely, most of them are traveling along Highway 6, which is what I drove up this morning. you're on the trip with me, right? And at the end of the 45 days, they finally make it into Jerusalem. They make it down in the Kidron Valley, looking right up at the temple where the Antichrist is seated. He's holed up in the temple. And at that moment is when Jesus appears in the sky and comes back down and stands again at the top of the Mount of Olives, which in 2-3 days I'll be climbing up there, and we'll talk more about that event at that time. But here it is, just looking at it right here. Very amazing.